Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to dive into the most intriguing topic, the most requested video on this channel for almost 2 years. And yes, it's finally time for the imprints. Before we begin, a big shout out to my friends Stellara and Wondercrab for all their time and effort spent with me to make this video happen. A huge shout out to them. With that being said, let's dive in. Before we dive into the imprints, there's another important topic I want to address, and this is debuffs from skills. Specifically, we'll talk about decreased movement speed and decreased attack speed. Every character has these debuffs on their skill set. It's crucial to know which of your class skills apply these debuffs. For example, as Berserker, our Vicious Rend applies movement speed reduction, and our Reckoning applies the attack speed reduction. It's also important to note that while every character has these two debuffs on some of their skills, it's not always necessary to use those skills in mass fights because those skills might lack forward guard or super armor, so have that in mind as well. Now let's discuss how those debuffs work on field. When you get a debuff from another player, whether it's decreased movement speed or attack speed, you can only have one instance of each type of debuff at any given time. If multiple players hit you with the same type of skill, example decreased movement speed skills, only one will take effect at a time. For instance, if you are slowed by Vicious Rend for 25% for 10 seconds, and then Elegatus hits you with his lightning charge, which slows by 15%, it will override your current slow, but reset the duration back to 10 seconds. So if it was initially 4 seconds remaining on your slow effect to end, before Legatus hits you again, it resets back up to full duration, but now at his lower percentage rate, which is instead 15%. Therefore, to keep high percentages active longer, replay stronger slows, like Vicious Rend for example, regularly during fights. The same principle applies when dealing with reduced attack speed too. Regarding imprints, that's something that we will cover later on in this video, but it's crucial for players to know exactly which skills in their skillset can debuff enemies, and this knowledge will improve your overall performance in fights. Another important aspect is understanding immunities. Many characters have immunities to movement speed reduction or attack speed reduction effects. For example, as Berserkers, when Vengeful Wrath is activated, we become immune to these attack speed debuffs from skills. Knowing this will help you better plan your build, since some imprints might be unnecessary if you have those immunities from passives or actives. Another key point involves monsters. If you're fighting near monsters and use a skill with a debuff, like reduced attack speed or movement speed, the debuff will apply to the monster if it hits them first instead of the player. So if you're being chased by other players, try dodging around monsters or get inside the monster area. They might save you from some debuffs, as the first animation will land on the monsters instead of you. Conversely, when hunting someone who runs into monster areas and you are aware of that, avoid using skills that will reduce movement speed or attack speed until they are outside of the zone and you have a clear hit. This also applies on imprints, except PvP specific ones, which only affect the players. Now that we've covered the basics of the debuffs from skills, let's move on to the juicy stuff, the builds. For those who don't know, you can visit the official BlackDesertMobile site to view all the possible roles for each piece individually. I'll post of course the link in the description along with everything else I'm gonna mention in this video. The meta builds. What I've done over here to save you from tons of time is moved along all the possible roles that you can get and are important for PvP specifically to this spreadsheet. I've done that a while ago. It was meant to serve purposes and help my F2P guildmates, but I never had the time to actually make the video, but here we are now, explaining everything. There are three most popular meta builds. One of them is the Regeneration Build. This is what I've been using so far. I'm still using a softer version because I'm transitioning now to a complete PvP build, and I'm gonna explain later on in the video the reasons. There is the GlassCannon build. Let me zoom in, sorry, for the people are playing from phone. And we're gonna discuss all of those things before you run and judge why this is there and why this is not. I'm gonna explain soon everything and how this build specifically works. This build is focused on PvP and AP, attack power. It can also be played with fixed damage, but I'll explain later why I don't consider that a good option. And this is why I haven't picked fixed damage in any of our builds. And of course, the all-around F2P, free-to-play. And this build is ideal for MP-dependent classes where you need combat resource gain. There are some specific scenarios, again, that for specific classes you might need something different, or you maybe need some more MP recovery on hit, but this is why I named this build all around, since it's very viable for every single class in the game, as it provides all the important stats. But yet again, as I'm just mentioning the builds, we're gonna dive a little deeper soon. These are pretty much it for builds. There are some honorable mentions like fixed damage builds, but keep in mind in the long run it's more beneficial to play the PvP ones. Additionally, it's best to stick with even non-primal versions of imprints rather than spreading random ones that won't benefit you at all. So remember, if you can't find your primal versions, red or above, actually red ones, above is the primal, red ones as well, should suffice until you find the primal versions. It's crucial not just having strong imprints, but building around them properly. Okay, let's move on by explaining individually what each of the important, at least, imprints do, and if all those are important, how important they are. Beginning by addressing the elephant in the room, of course, this is the PvP imprints, how they work, how much of important they are. I'm gonna begin by addressing, so for everyone it's clear and concise, how PvP damage reduction works. So you have a limit on your PvP damage reduction from all the sources that can provide this stat, up to 50%, and it can go up to 70%, another 20%, by rolling in your charm of succession. If that's important or not, depends. In scenarios that you will face people with no PvP imprints at all, it's gonna be super important, super handy on your spec, since your PvP damage reduction will be up to 20% higher, so it's fine. Also, the same thing will apply if they run PvP imprints, but there are not a lot of them, and they, in total of calculations, they don't bring a decent amount that can actually lower in negative numbers your PvP damage reduction. So in those scenarios as well, it's also good. But let's move on, since I've made a graph for you guys so you can understand it even better. Let's go right here and let's view this, that your PvP defense comes out from items. Rift can provide you Fairy, Harmony, Runes, Crystals, and Totem. My personal PvP defense from all those sources comes up to 93.8. I'm getting an additional 14.31 from my 3 pets, which are currently max on 2 Ascension, 2 stars level 7. My rune slot is still level 11. It can go up to 20. You can get also higher numbers from your pets as well, in case you are focusing on this specific rune slot. But if you are hunting, of course, PvP damage reduction, the other 2 slots, also for damage dealt, are more important. Since I'm playing a Berserker, my active skill provides me with, sorry, not my active skill, my Unleash, when it gets activated, I'm getting an additional 15% passive bonus in damage reduction, and all those PvP damage reductions, specifically in my case, can go up to 123, but only, yes, only the 60.4 will apply as damage reduction. However, in terms of negating those PvP imprints, if some player possess all those imprints, okay, let's assume that we face a player that has all the imprints at the max number, it's 78%. It will lower my 123 to 45% damage reduction. Even if my damage reduction limit was 70%, it wouldn't matter because it's just the limit. Still, the same percentage would apply for me. I would still be lowered to 45%. Still, it's a decent number. I can't lie on that. And also, besides the percentage that you're gonna get from the PvP reduction, it's also the AP and DP difference. So yeah, still when I face someone that has full PvP imprints, it's gonna be a problem for him since my DP will be way higher from his AP. So even with a full set. However, if there are two people that runs, those numbers are theoretically, even if the second player didn't have 78% and had like maybe 50%, still my PvP total defense would end to a negative number. And that means that two players with full PvP imprints can negate the player that maybe I have the most PvP defense in the game. Maybe I'm not, but I assume that since from items the max is 110, I'm 93.8. Maybe they have 100, it's like 10%, 7 to 8% more. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is to get the point. How those imprints are affecting your total damage in the game. Now, some examples of how important those imprints are. If we've tested in a 70k CP player that he has up to 80% PvP defense, which is not great, not bad. He's an F2P, and this video it's more focused for the free-to-play people, so you can understand exactly the importance of those imprints. Now we can go here and you see, even for me, even for a high CP player, the difference on those imprints. If you can see the damage output right now that it was like 3.8, we used Rent with Al branch. It's basically Al basically provides more damage to Rent, but every time I crit, I have 0 PvP imprints on me right now in this test. As you can see, my damage is still great, but you will see later on this video how greater it can become with those imprints. What we did later is putting out 2 PvP imprints, 26% PvP damage reduction, and the damage, if you can see, up since slash does 3 animations. This is why I'm typing the damage from its slash. But as you can see, the damage was like from 12,000 to 12,000 to 12,900, which is not great. Since 26% is only 26%, the negation went up from 80% to 54%. So the player had still the specific account has 65 limit, so this is why the damage was not so great. But if you are facing someone, for example, that doesn't have only 80% and he has maybe like 95 plus, 2 PvP imprints will do nothing if you are facing him alone, since your reduction will not even reduce his limit, so he will still be at the max PvP limit. From 4 and above, however, most of the players are not above 100 PvP defense, so more than 4 PvP imprints you will start seeing actually difference in your damage. In our case, if you can see, only 23 more, and our damage from one single slash, okay, from one single rent, from 12,900 went up to 15k damage, so 3k more. As the PvP imprint reduction goes higher, you can see that damage starts to skyrocket, 1,500 more, 6 PvP imprints to 18.6 damage, which is from my no PvP 12k to full PvP 18.6, which is 6.6k damage, which is like 50 plus 52% increase in my DPS. And we're talking about the most ridiculous. I mean, this skill is not even you don't even use it for actual damage. It's used for forward guard. It's used maybe to reduce your enemy wound speed, but it's not one of the big DPS sources on Zerg. And imagine a single slash doing. For me, it works like this, but also for other players that don't have such high CP, you will also see a difference in your damage. Additionally, despite your personal PvP imprints, we know as well that your friend PvP imprints can become handy, and all together they stack and work just perfectly. In the scenario we've tried, as you see, with a friend that was carrying a 62% PvP reduction from imprints, my damage was 3 times in a total. This is what matters. The total damage was 25.5k damage on a target that bears like 40k HP or something, which is insanely from our original no PvP imprints 12k damage from a single slash. I'm not gonna mention about Rattle's Reckonings and all those huge PvP damage skills, but our single lowest, maybe not the lowest, but one skill that you don't use so often for damage purposes, came up to almost 50 to 60%, actually 50 something percent increase in the total damage. Actually not 50, what I'm saying is more than 100. So 2 people, as you can see, the negation in this specific player from both PvP imprints that we had was almost up to minus 60% or something. So this is why the damage output was so big. And as the PvP imprints grow, such as your total DPS will grow. To showcase that, just for fun purposes, maybe, if you remember in the start of explaining the imprints, you saw how much damage we were doing from one slash, and see the difference now. I mean, some got obliterated, okay? So you can understand how significant the difference in damage is when all of those people in your guild, in your team, or whatever you're doing, use PvP imprints. Okay, by addressing how PvP imprints work, I hope I was as clear and concise as possible for you guys to completely understand how much of important those imprints are, especially if you run fights. All the latest content we have anyway, it's more of a CP balance content. So engaging fights with a number advantage, you are 2 against 1, having both a nice amount of PvP damage reduction, and your enemy will get not obliterated, but you will notice a huge difference on the damage output you will apply to your opponent, and maybe he flees, maybe you have better experience overall in the game, etc. Now let's move on by explaining the rest of the imprints. MP recovery on hit, which is very important and crucial, especially for mana dependent classes. I would change the term MP recovery with combat resource recovery, as it's the same exact thing. Many people were confused about it and they renamed it or add the description that it's for both things, since some classes have mana, some classes have something else. Berserker, for example, has this rage bar. Let me show you this rage bar. As you see down there, indicated with the yellow color, and technically what that does is that when I do hits or when I do skills, the amount that I'm gonna get back, it's important for Berserker specifically to activate his passive to get the rage bar to the max as soon as possible, but it doesn't really matter on that specific class, as many of the classes are depending on that specific resource. Controversially, exactly the decreased adventurous combat resource on hit works in the opposite way, as it's a debuff for all the combat resources on game. If your opponent doesn't run at all MP recovery on hit and you have the combat resource on hit decrease debuff, he will have huge issues managing his skills, his mobility, his utility. It's gonna be way problematic. So having at least one MP recovery on hit, it's important for classes that are using mana to can actually negate this effect if other people are playing that. Anyway, this effect can only be applied once, it doesn't stack, so you will always get the highest effect along with the burn. Those two together can only be applied once. It's once from all the players. Let's say, for instance, it doesn't go individually 10 burns. You will always get debuffed once from those specific imprints with the highest, of course, rate. If it's 12% the highest, you will get applied with that. So negating also, it's important, but as a matter of fact, the biggest factor over here is to be more effective in utility, in your damage output, using your skills. So having that in a high percentage, at least 36%, using 3, 1 to negate, 2 to gain, is maybe more than enough for some classes, maybe not, but overall it's an all-around F2P build, so it's gonna work just fine for every single class that use mana. Now let's move on with another 2 important imprints, which is technically your attack speed and movement speed passives. We are talking about attack speed and movement speed passives, okay? As I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video, and this is actually why I mentioned that, is that from skills from players, you can only get 1 instance of a debuff. So, for example, if you get 1 rend from another berserker, that reduce your movement speed by 25%. But if you are playing 2 of them, 2 movement speed imprints along in your rings, you will get a 28% in your overall stack. So whenever someone uses a movement speed reduction skill against you, even if that skill it's like 30%, your movement speed will always be at its cap, while it's and that cap is at 20%. So technically, by using 2 movement speed imprints, there is no single way someone can actually reduce your movement speed, since we don't have imprints that reduce your movement speed. However, there are some classes, for example, Primrose with the freeze, that provide a huge amount of movement speed reduction. Also, I believe it's Wusa's teleportation skill that does like say 60 or 70%. So for very specific classes, you will get still slowed even with those imprints on you, but have in mind that every other class, usually those skills, the movement speed reduction skills, are up to 25%, so you will be not just fine, you will be immortal, immune, let's say, not immortal, immune to those debuffs. Same exact principle applies to movement speed. Specifically for Berserker, this is why I mentioned on this video. Maybe this imprint is not, for attack speed. Maybe this imprint is not so important since he has the immunity from the passive and he can't get reduced attack speed from skills. However, from imprints, and this is the negation that you're gonna see over here, decrease attack speed on hit, a 14%. However, even if he's immune on skills, he's not on imprints. So if I run this 14% on attack speed, if I run 2 decrease attack speed on hit, 7 and 7 on my main weapon and the bracelet, for example, that 14% can be negated from a permanent roll on your gloves. So technically, even if someone runs 2 imprints of reducing attack speed, specifically on Zerker we are talking about right now, since he cannot be attack speed, he cannot get an attack speed reduction from skills, technically he is also immune in attack speed debuffs. However, it's not so important, so because some classes, the way that they are using the skills, even if from imprints it gets, let's say that 10 people have those, not 10 people, maybe 3 people have those decreased attack speed on hit, and the reduction goes up to 0%. Even then, personally, I haven't noticed a huge difference. Also, my friends noticed me about that it's not a significant difference on your skill rotation and your movement speed. But if a lot of people using those decreased attack speed on hit imprints and hit you, yeah, for sure after -10 or -20 you will notice a huge difference. Especially, we're talking about Berserker. For other classes, I was playing Solaris in some lives. I played Shura in some lives. I remember, and I wasn't using back then the permanent attack speed on gloves. But I remember back then when someone, because those classes don't have actually attack speed immunity from skills, So for example, if some class use a debuff on attack speed from skills, that maybe it's like 15% or 25%, and on top of that, he runs also reduction attack speed from imprints, those will stack, since I'm not playing a class with immunity on attack speed, and the overall percentage will be higher. If a second player comes and use not skill, because skills can't stack, but also using decreased attack speed imprints, the difference will be way noticeable. And I remember especially on my Solaris gameplay on Black Sun, I've met two berserkers that both were running attack speed reduction on their imprints, and I couldn't even use the skill. I had to flee, it was very bad for me, so have that in mind. For some classes, the decreased attack speed might be insanely handy. Okay, let's move on with the rest of the imprints. One of the important ones as well is the 10% chance to reduce evasion cooldown when attacked. How does that work exactly? If you run multiple copies, we have 2 on our specific build. With a 10% chance, they don't stack in terms of chance, so you can get 20%, but the seconds that you obtain in the total reduction are stacking. So if you run 2, for example, it's 4 seconds in each piece, so 4 plus 4 comes up to 8 seconds. The dodge requires almost 10 seconds to get refilled. So it's a very, very satisfying amount, especially on mass fights, especially if you run mobility classes, to add an extra dodge from time to time. Now, the increased black spirit damage on evasion in terms of what you could get, and as I have explained earlier, when you are trying to run, for example, you can get AP on evasion, or you can get HP on evasion, but it doesn't really matter so much since you are not gonna stack all those HP regeneration in your total build. If you have like 200 from just an evasion from here and there, it won't be such, you won't notice such of a difference. However, if you stack the black spirit damage on evasion, 50% is quite noticeable. And since we are playing a build with PvP imprints on it, having as well a high burst on your black spirit skill is not bad. As if you fight someone that with your guildies and you have, for example, 3 people with PvP imprints on him, his reduction will be negative. So a black spirit skill along with all those buffs you get in the black spirit from other sources, another 50% on top of that, it's quite amazing. Let's see what's left. I think we covered everything regarding the strange, at least, imprints. The skill damage 1 to 11, it's only possible. The only possible roll comes in the necklace, depending on the class, which skill it's the most important on your rotation. What skill does the most damage, I would recommend, comes up to 20%. It's the hardest actually imprint to get, along with the earring, to get a very decent roll there. So those two, the earring and the necklace, as you can see, are the most expensive, I believe. 130 right now, it's the market value, 108 for the necklace. I have done that so I can check regularly, when the prices goes up or lower. Some of those imprints, for example, the bracelet, the weapon, are very cheap, as you can see. So in case you want to spend silver, which I don't recommend, but in case you want to spend silver, I would suggest to save for the hardest ones, which is necklace and earrings. All the other pieces are obtainable. So now let's move on. Since we covered all that, let's move on to explain the builds. Let's start by the build that we already were covering so far, which is the all-around F2P. We explained how PvP damage actually works. We explained about the black spirit damage on evasion. We explained why you should have at least one copy of the decreased combat resource on hit and the burn. Anyway, you can have up to one of those in your build, so it's important to run those as well. Maybe burn comes second, but for sure decreased adventures combat resource on hit, it's a must. Maybe you can skip burn in terms of if you want, for example, a 4th MP recovery on hit, or you can just, if you check my graph right here, You can just play around, you know, with the possible rolls, move something to here, move something to there. Have in mind as well that I've placed also the possible rolls to the possible rolls, so you can't actually have everything you want on every piece. It's specific rolls on some pieces, but all those specific rolls can end up on that result that I've made right here, which is this build. You can do changes from here and there. Decrease attack speed, which is 14%. This is also something that it's under consideration, but if we take under consideration as well that you are playing guild versus guild fights and all of your people have this imprint on you, especially if someone dives on you and you just hit him with 3 or 4 people with this debuff, in most case scenarios, most of the classes will have an issue. So having that as well, anyway, you don't have such of a great options if you don't play the reduced attack speed. You can maybe on some specific cases play AP, but I wouldn't recommend that. Just to have that as well in a mass fight will become more handy, especially as we said, that we are playing an all-around F2P build. Having your max HP in your armor increased by 4000, it's a decent amount. As you saw, even the highest CP can provide with 25k damage, maybe not 25, but 18,000 with 1 slash, so negating some of those damage with some extra HP, it's always important. We explain about attack speed and movement speed that you can negate. Technically, that's why you have those passives in your imprints, to negate the other player's debuffs on you. The skill damage 1 up to 11, it's up to the character that you play, what skills it's more important in your build. And of course, we explained as well why MP recovery is important on mana dependent classes and the reduced evasion on hit. However, if your class is not an MP dependent class, a combat resource dependent class, and you want to play something different, an alternative option, and trust me, I'm gonna explain soon why. You can play GlassCannon for purely balanced CP content. It works completely perfectly, especially for novs, especially on classes. Kunoichi came in my mind first, which is a class that it's not so mana dependent. Only the shurikens require mana, but it's technically a PvP skill. But even if you use it for PvP, like my friend Marquis that made a lot of Kunoichi video using that skill, he usually uses it to disengage and not to spam, you know, DPS with that. So for a GlassCannon build that doesn't require mana, stacking so much AP works perfectly, as you will have the increased PvP damage from hit, and as we mentioned earlier in the video, when all those end, AP difference in comparison with your enemy DP comes up handy, and all those multiplicate effects from the PvP reduction will be even more from the difference that you have in AP. So it's very important, especially on content like this. I'm not sure how Azuna Karana will apply in terms of CP. They said that more CP will get more experience, but if you also get CP with that, maybe it's not so important. But if you are near to CP with someone, getting that extra AP will provide you with more damage. We're playing, of course, the burn and the decreased combat resource on hit. They're very important in every single build. Now the decreased attacker's AP when attacked, 140. As you can see, we have it on the bracelets. I have it on the ring and the armor. What that does exactly is, if you're, for example, playing Kunoichi, that came to my mind, and since we referred as an example with that class, usually you want to hunt alone at top with 2 people, which is for me personally the best hunting team. 2 people with PvP imprints is more than enough. Having a Kunoichi with also this effect, the AP when you're getting attacked, not only you will have the AP gains that you will cover a distance in terms of DPS, but it will also help you getting less DPS from your opponent, as technically you will reduce his AP in terms with your DP. So trading super armors, maybe trading other skills will become quite more easier on you by having that. Anyway, you don't have so many options better rather than this. rather than decrease attacker's AP. Maybe in some cases you can play the chance to reduce evasion cooldown when attacked, but if we are talking about super armor traits, why do you need exactly to run or to hunt? Yeah, you will tell, maybe you will say that it's more important as you will dodge and escape some damage, but usually what you want is to completely destroy your opponent with a GlassCannon build and take some damage. You know, sometimes it's not such bad as you want to keep your dodges to hunt him rather than run. So this is the thought behind that. Of course, this one, let's actually replace that. Okay, now we're better. In terms of getting the decreased attack speed on bracelet, since it's only 7%, it's gonna be insignificant in whatever engage you're gonna have 1v1 or multiple. For the same exact reason that you will play the decreased attacker's AP when attacked, for the same exact reason you will play a heap damage decreased by 50%. Choose one of those. I would recommend, if you can get the heap version, might be better from Al, since a heap does more damage at the end of the day. So it's important as well to keep trading super armors by receiving less damage while at the same time doing more. And this is the reason that I've said earlier I don't prefer fixed damage, because fixed damage has a cooldown. First of all, most of the GlassCannon classes have multiple hits, so the AP gain will be applied to each hit individually. Another bonus is that your PvP damage imprints will reduce your opponent PvP defense technically, so you will do way more damage from all the skills that you will be using along with your AP. And I don't even want to mention that combined with another player, if you're 2 players, which is the magic number for me, maybe 3, but not more, whatever you will find inside Novs or whatever CP balance gonna have in the future, it's gonna be an easy kill for you. At least you're gonna pop his totem and maybe he used the BS escape skill, but this is overall the idea, to completely burst him. We are playing also recover decrease on hit instead of something else like the combat resource. We have gained it in the ring, so it's not necessary to play it here. This what it does is technically when someone using HP recovery methods, maybe from a build, maybe from HP recovery from potions, you will reduce that amount by 18%, not separately to each effect that he has, but overall. So if he regenerates, for example, 2000 HP from a potion, he will regenerate 1880. So it's another 120 damage in theory for you inside your burst. Because potions, you can't negate potions. Potions will get activated, so you're gonna have more damage overall. And I think beside those 2 builds is also Regeneration Build to be mentioned. But as I've said earlier, this build was completely a whale build. Since the damage was there anyway, as you saw in the start when I was showcasing the PvP imprints, even if I needed 2.5 flashes to kill 1 person, who cares at the end of the day, when I can survive for maybe 3 or 4 minutes more inside the fight, with the addition benefit that I can get outside of the fight. Let me showcase that really fast, since this is a video from the past. But as you can see my HP, I went outside of the fight, how fast my regeneration build would recover my HP, and I can get inside the fight pretty fast. But this is only specifically that build for very high CP players. And when I'm saying very high CP players, I'm talking about top 10, very high CP players on the rankings. Because any other damage spec, other DPS character that will play this build won't benefit out of that, since you are dying too fast anyway. If you can sustain damage and adding all those regenerations on you can be beneficial, but only in those specific scenarios. There are some scenarios like if you play Titan, for example, it's not bad to play a regeneration build, since Titan is beefy and has a lot of HP regeneration itself. Yes, it's gonna be very problematic for your opponent for you to die, but at the end of the day, if even in that specific scenario, I don't know if I would prefer to play if I would prefer to play a Regeneration Build in the Titan again, because, you know, PvP Imprint stack. So if I go hunt with one friend of mine or two friends of mine, I'm gonna have extra damage gain output inside our burst. So even then, I would still recommend the F2P all-around build for that specific reason. Now, I think with that said, we covered everything regarding the imprints and how they work. I know the video was very long. Thanks for everyone stayed so far. And this is the reason actually why I delayed this video, because I knew that it's gonna take me so much time to actually explain all those things. Thanks, however, thanks for staying so far in this video, for watching till the end. If you haven't subscribed, well, you watched, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes video, so better subscribe to the channel. If you have any thoughts about all those imprint sets, please type down in the comments. If I did any mistake or I forgot something, to mention something, you can still type me down in the comments and I will put it corrected in top of the pinned comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time, yeah.